Bismillahi walhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah Rabbi shrah li sadri wayassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and peace be upon you all. Welcome. The topic I have for today is about the level of internal control that we each have over our lives. And the reason why I want to speak about this is because a lot of people stress and feeling stuck in their lives and not moving forward has a lot to do with being disconnected from the level of control that they have over their choices and over their lives in general, right? And so in my work, I have seen people on opposite extremes oftentimes, because people usually, when they're dysfunctioning, they are usually on opposite extremes before we find our way to the center, which is balance. And the opposite extremes they're usually on one end where it's like, I control nothing, I am helpless, everything happens to me, I have no choice, I have no power, and they feel this sense of overwhelming helplessness over their lives, that they're at the mercy of everything outside of them. And then there's the opposite extreme where someone who is over controlling, I control everything, I need to control everything, and I struggle when I don't control things, okay? So you have people who are on opposite sides of the spectrum, and I want you to really reflect on where you are. And then the beautiful place to be is in the middle, where you understand that Allah has given you a capacity to control things to a certain degree, while recognizing that even when you are controlling things, Allah is in full control, right? But I find that a lot of people are on either ends, and they're not here. And I think that also, unfortunately, and this is something I've been addressing a lot recently, is just, I feel like passiveness and complacency is often promoted in our communities and in religious spaces, where, deen is talked about in a way where as long as you're praying and you're fasting and you're doing religious things that, I don't know how to explain it. I'm still trying to kind of formulate something I'm witnessing in our community spaces, where I feel like the more religious sometimes people become, the more complacent they are, and they think, well, Allah is in control. Where it's like a form of spiritual bypassing, where you use the deen to not do the work. And people do this, right? They use the deen to avoid their pain. They use faith to not work on themselves. And then everything is chalked up to, well, it's naseeb. And so we have to be careful of this, because Islam does not promote passiveness. It does not promote complacency. It does not promote this attitude of, it is what it is. And it does not promote you feeling constant helplessness and at the mercy of that which is external. So just because Allah is in control doesn't mean He did not give you the capacity to also control. Allah gave you free will. Allah gave you the capacity to eat. Allah gave you the capacity to go and get your rizq. Allah gave you the capacity to study. Allah gave you the capacity to see, even though He's in control of your sight, right? So don't confuse, don't forget the capacity He has given you to have control over your choices in life. And so what I want to talk about today is the difference between internal locus of control and external locus of control. And why it's so important for us to develop an internal locus of control. And I'm going to talk about the difference between them. So first, what is a locus of control? Locus of control is basically your belief or your perception of how much control you have over the events and what happens in your life. Okay? So it's categorized in two categories: internal and external. Internal is you believe that your actions and your choices impact the outcome or determine the outcome. Okay? Now we're gonna adjust this a little bit through an Islamic lens. Okay? We're just giving you the definition as it is, as we know it. And then external control is believing that external factors like luck and fate or others control their lives. As Muslims, we're actually in the middle. We believe we have internal locus of control to a certain capacity, But we believe in the external locus of control, that there is nasib, there is a concept as qadar, and Allah is in control and He determines the outcomes. So we don't want to develop an internal locus of control that says everything I do determines the outcome. No. So I'm going to adjust it now through an Islamic lens, which is that Allah has given me the capacity of control, to have control my choices, to control what I do, to have control over certain things, but the outcomes are in His hands. Okay? But I want to talk about some of the advantages of having an internal locus of control and some of the disadvantages of having an external, especially I'm talking about extremes, right? Of an extreme external locus of control. So for a person who has an internal locus of control, they believe that they are responsible for their own success. They take personal responsibility for their success, for their shortcomings, for their progress, for their lack of progress. They are people who have high now there's levels to this, right? You could have a little bit of internal locus of control and then a lot of external locus of control. You could have high internal locus of control and low, so everybody's at a different level. But let's say a person has high internal locus of control. They are a person who are constantly turning inward and seeing what role did I play? What is my responsibility in this? How did I contribute to this problem? They're not likely to be people who go outward and blame, oh, well, this happened because this person did this, and this happened because this person didn't help me, and this person, did this or that. And they're not the type to go outward and blame external things right away, right? So they attribute a lot of their successes and their victories and their achievements to their efforts, okay? And they take responsibility for their actions. Okay, this is internal locus of control. Now, again, I'm adjusting this throughout my talk through an Islamic lens, because even when you have an internal locus of control, we don't want to attribute everything that happens to every good that happens to us, because of my effort. This is also, Islam is about balance, subhanAllah. It's about protecting you from becoming arrogant, but it's also protecting you from being passive and helpless and, and powerless. So when you achieve something, you're like, Alhamdulillah, yes, Alhamdulillah, Allah gave me the capacity to choose and to put in the effort, but I know it is from Allah. But you don't forget, and I think this is where the tricky part is. I think this is where people oftentimes don't do the work and expect Allah to come through for them, because they take this concept of, well, everything's from Allah anyway, so it doesn't matter what I do. No, it does, because Allah helps those who help themselves. Now, a person with external locus of control, they often believe that the external forces like fate and luck, like I mentioned, and other people, this is the key, are more powerful in shaping and influencing their lives than their own actions. And a lot of people are very high in this. They think, oh my God, this person is going to be the reason I succeed in my career. If this person is going to be my connection to this and this person is going to be, my ticket to that. They just put so much power in other people. And what happens is that they often, remember I said internal locus of control, they attribute their successes and failures to their responsibility and their actions and their efforts. A person with an external locus of control often attributes their success or their failures to factors beyond their control. So factors that have nothing to do with them. I'm just explaining definition-wise, right? Is that they'll often say, well, I failed or I succeeded because of things outside of me. Okay. Now, this concept in psychology of our locus of control, it's influenced by a lot of things, your upbringing. It could be impacted by trauma. A lot of people, for example, who have a history of trauma tend to feel more helpless because they went through things where the external circumstances really traumatized them and really impacted them. So they do, this is why healing is so important, because when you go through trauma, and you feel the sense of helplessness, and you feel this sense, especially if it was childhood trauma, because a child will feel at the mercy of their parents, at the mercy of their external environment. For children, their parents are their whole world. So when their parent is not in a good mood, or their parent is not well, their parent is hurting them, they do feel helpless, they do feel powerless. And that can carry on into adulthood, right? Where they feel like, what power do I have? They're still functioning from that helpless child, right, that got hurt. This is why healing is so important. So I do want to address that, because the locus of control is impacted. It's not just like, oh, you're just helpless. No, sometimes it does have rooting in childhood experiences, in past trauma, right? But it does have its roots, but it does impact so many aspects of a person's life. It does. And it can impact, the way you work towards your goals, your ability to achieve certain goals you have in life, your ability to be resilient, your health outcomes, your motivation. So a lot of people who have very low internal locus of control, and very high external locus of control, they feel like everything is because of what happens outside of them. You will find that they have a negative view towards working or striving towards or reaching their potential. They're just like, this is why we have to catch ourselves, because we don't want to be so complacent that we just chalk up everything to its nasib. And so many people let their lives go by because because they think, oh, everything's just going to come to them, and they're helpless. What can I do? And so this area, as in psychology, it helps us, understand. It basically gives us an understanding of how a person views their own agency and their own power and their own ability to change something, because that's important in healing and work that you're doing on yourself and your success in life at any level. You have to have a sense of agency. You have to have a sense of like, Allah has given me a responsibility over things. Allah has given me the power to change. Allah has given me a capacity to work on things, right? And so we can't forget that. You can't forget the role you play in your own stuckness. You can't forget the role that you play in your own, even like, in just your situation in life. You can't forget the role that you play. You have to be able to evaluate that and say, what role do I play in the fact that I've been stuck in this area for so long? Or the fact that I haven't been able to achieve this thing? Or yes, it could be nasib, of course, and it could be the fact that it's not time yet for you to achieve it. But you understand that, you believe that, but you don't spend your energy on that. You spend your energy on, what can I do? Because that's what empowers you mentally. That's what empowers you emotionally. A lot of people spend so much energy on this, but why isn't it nasib? And why didn't I get it yet? Or why didn't I achieve this yet? And they spend so much energy on that, and it's fruitless energy. So you could be spending that same energy on, well, what can I do? And that gives you life. That gives you a return. I've talked about this before, but anytime you feel stuck and you feel overwhelmed by life circumstances, and you ask yourself, what can I do? You feel like a return of energy. Because the human being is designed to do that. Is designed to say, what role can I play? And you see this in the people of Gaza. I've mentioned this before. Like, there's chaos around them. They're always like, what can I do? You'll see them cleaning up their house, rebuilding, doing whatever they can. Because whenever you ask, what can I do? What role can I play in my own life? What step can I take to change my circumstances? You will find that Allah gives you a return of energy. You feel nourished by that. Even just that question empowers you. Whereas the other question is, when you start asking questions that start out with why, you will find that it depletes your energy. Like if you start asking, why is this happening? And why isn't it nasib? And why didn't I get this yet? And why didn't I achieve these goals? You'll find by the end of those questions, you are depleted. Will you have the motivation to get up and do anything? You won't. So you could use that same energy to ask different questions that are energy-filling, nourishing, and actually empower you to do something about your life. And at the end of the day, the difference will be is that you will at least go to bed knowing that you did something different. And that's what matters the most to us, wallahi, is that you tried. You can go to bed knowing you tried, you took a step, you're not helpless, you're not powerless, you're not passive, you're not complacent. You are taking the means that Allah has given you to change your circumstances. And this is what Islam teaches us. I always mention this hadith where the Prophet ﷺ, he tells us that even if the day of judgment is falling upon us, and you are planting something as small as a sapling, a small plant, to still plant it. There's nothing more destructive and more chaotic than the day of judgment. And yet the Prophet ﷺ is teaching us to still do good. Why? Because that's what empowers the human being. And the good that you do matters regardless of the chaos around you. That the good that you do in front of Allah matters and is never lost. It never goes in vain. Even if all you see around you is chaos. Even if everyone around you is not changing. Even if people in your life are still giving you, a difficult time. Even if people at your work are still functioning in the same unhealthy or toxic way, and you're like, what am I doing here? You looking for the good that you can do in your home, in your work, in your school, in society, is what empowers you. And that's what's going to give you life. And that's what's going to make such a huge difference in how you function in the world. A lot of people fall into a state of fixating on what's going wrong, and they become so disconnected from what they can do right. And the thing is that if you do that, first of all, there's always going to be something wrong outside of you. There's always. And if you do that, you're just going to go into this state of helplessness and powerlessness and feel depleted and not work towards anything, right? So, people who have a good level of internal locus of control, that's associated with a lot of mental health benefits. It's associated with lower stress, better mental health, greater motivation to work towards their goals. So, and I'm going to go over some advantages as well. And then the external locus of control, they tend to have disadvantages. So let's go over the disadvantages first of external locus of control. So I mentioned this already, but one of the disadvantages of always fixating on that which is outside of you and feeling like that which is outside of you has control over you is that you become passive and helpless, and you don't feel motivated to take action because you fall into this state of what's the point, And as I'm speaking, I really want you to think of an area in your life that you've been working towards, that you fall into this external locus of control, mindset, where you start feeling like, what's the point? You start getting passive. You start, blaming that which is outside of you. You have a lower sense of control and agency, right, over your life, and you will fixate more on people. This is a big issue, and this is why a lot of people have resentment, because they fixate so much on what other people are not doing right. So it's really interesting. Like when you have this high external locus of control, you start hyper fixating on everyone's shortcomings. Oh, if that person did that right, I wouldn't be in the situation. If that person could do this, I wouldn't be. So it really it makes you prone to resentment and bitterness inside. Because you think that your life would be different if other people just acted right. You think your life would be better if other people just did what they're supposed to do. And you start falling into this negative loop of thinking in your mind. And a lot of people fall into this. And it's so disempowering, because really that sense of helplessness that a person feels in those situations it's not fun. And then, I see this a lot, for example, when people struggle with self-abandonment, right? And a lot of times they'll fixate on, oh, this person, didn't show up for me, or this person didn't do this, and this person didn't do that. And a lot of times they don't realize that they're not showing up for themselves. They're abandoning themselves. But they're noticing it more when others do it. And it's really interesting is that when you get them to start focusing on showing up for themselves and not abandoning themselves, that's what gives them life, and that's what gives them nourishment. And their hyperfixation on what others are doing or not doing becomes lesser, so they become healthier. Another disadvantage of having a high external locus of control is difficulty with decision making. So a person who is constantly at the mercy of that which is outside of them, they struggle to make decisions. They don't feel as responsible for the consequences too. So they'll make decisions, but then they don't realize that they're also responsible for their decisions. Because, hey, someone influenced me, or someone told me this, or it's so easy to go outward and say, well, I made this decision because of you, or I made this decision because of that person, or because this person said this. So again, back to that cycle of blame. Difficulty coping with challenges. Person who has a high external locus of control struggle to cope with, which goes back to low resilience. They will struggle to cope with the difficulties of life and adversity, and they will constantly attribute problems to the external, factors or external circumstances rather than their own role. And this is what happens in our society. A lot of times, people will blame Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They'll say, why did Allah do this? Or why didn't Allah help? Or why didn't Allah, and they don't evaluate how we contributed to our own condition as a society as well. Our own condition as an ummah. That Allah gave us a guideline, and there's a consequence to not following that. There's a consequence to not prioritizing our Creator. There's a consequence to not prioritizing His prescriptions. For example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded us to give zakat, to give from our wealth. There's a consequence not doing that. So people will not be giving from their wealth, but then asking, why is Allah creating poverty? But then Allah didn't create poverty. Allah actually created enough resources for the whole world. And the reason why there are poor people, it's not because we don't have enough resources, it's because you have a small amount of people consuming so much of it. So it's very easy to go outward, and it's very easy to develop a high external locus of control without faith, without anchoring yourself in what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taught us, without anchoring yourself in the Quran, without remembering that you're accountable. It's very easy to develop a high external locus of control where everything you see, you're blaming Allah, you're blaming other people, you're blaming this and that, anything but yourself. And I always talk about, mental health disorders as a progression. Things progress over time. So if you look at even on one extreme, a person who is diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder, this is one of the factors. Everything is someone else's fault. So we always have to take preventative measures to taking care of our hearts. This is why it's important that when there's a situation, anything, a personal situation in your life, or even a conflict with someone else, or a situation in your relationships, to develop a habit of asking, what role did I play? It humbles the ego, allows your heart to rise, and it protects you from developing this guardedness and this, habit of blaming or going outside of you to always make yourself feel better. Because that's why people do it, right? Very hard to face yourself and say, what role did I play? It's very hard. But subhanAllah, there's always a role that we play in almost anything. This is something that I find in my work, is that, yes, there are things that happen to us and we don't control those things, but there are so many things that people struggle with. They have a role to play, and they're not focusing enough on that role. Maybe they're not focusing enough on making better choices. They're not focusing enough on doing the work. They're not focusing enough on taking steps to their healing. That's why when I talk about healing, I tell people, be careful of just being in a phase for too long where you're just talking about why something happened to you. Because that phase can last a very long time, where it's important to a certain degree, but it's not the most important part of healing. And I think our society has programmed people to stay in that phase of why did this happen to me? Why did this happen to me? Why did this happen to me? And they never go beyond that phase into, okay, well, what role can I play in rectifying the effects of what happened to me? Or what role can I play in passing on. What role can I play in changing my situation? Wallahi, when you look at people who are successful and people you look up to, you will find that they have this trait of like, what can I do? And how, okay, this happened to me. Okay, I went through this, but what can I do? What power did Allah give me to change my circumstances? And we have the best examples of the Prophets ﷺ who endured such great difficulties. Hajj, the season of Hajj is coming up, and the days of Dhul Hijjah, and where we start connecting more to the pillars of Hajj and why people do sa'i. Why is there this powerful, why is the sa'i going between Safa and Marwa such a crucial part of Hajj? Why is it important that we do that? We're literally following in the footsteps of one of the best women to walk this earth, a woman who taught us to remember that we are not helpless, who exemplified for us how to trust in Allah while remembering our capacity to work and strive towards change. When Ibrahim alayhi salam was commanded to leave Hajar and her son in the desert, she kept asking him, about why he's leaving, and then she thought, wait, has Allah commanded you to do so? And so that's her sensitivity to, wait a minute, and let me stop asking, is this something from Allah? Because I don't want to go against something that's from Allah. Look at that sensitivity. We never think about that. Like, why did she go from asking him a couple of times to, wait, has Allah commanded you? That's her sensitivity to, wait, what if this is something that Allah wants? Am I questioning it? And he said, yes, it is something that Allah has commanded. What was her response? Immediately, then He will not forsake us. Look at that tawakkul. But also, look at how she responded immediately to uncertainty with certainty. We talked last week extensively about uncertainty, right? And how to cope with uncertainty. And the best way to cope with uncertainty is to be like Hajar. To respond to the uncertainty that we face in the world, the fear of the unknown, the fear of the future, with certainty of who Allah is. Because when there is chaos and when there's uncertainty, shaitan will be standing there to instill doubt in your heart. Why would Allah leave me? And people ask this about Hajar. Why would Allah leave her and her child in the desert? But look at her. She did not feed into the doubts that shaitan places into so many people today, hundreds and hundreds of years later. The person who was actually in the situation did not feed into shaitan's whisperings and said, then He will not forsake me. So it's so important that when you're faced with uncertainty and you fear what's going to happen to you or your loved ones in the future, you start getting worried or scared, there's so much going on, to anchor yourself. You have to fight for yourself. I talked about this concept before about like fighting for yourself, which means what? You have to fight for the security of your inner world and protecting it. And a lot of times people don't fight for it in the moment. They wait until their guards are down, they wait until things get worse, then they start fighting for themselves. When something happens or when you face uncertainty, it's important to hold on. Think of like a rope that you're holding onto, the rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Think of like, okay, this is not the time for me to weaken. This is not the time for me to be soft or delay. This is the time for me to anchor myself in what I know about Allah. Because when you face uncertainty and when there's so much doubt about what the future holds, shaitan will come and distort your perception of Allah. That is his goal, by the way. I see this all the time. When people are going through their most difficult moments, shaitan will come and distort their perception of Allah. Well, why would Allah not answer your dua? Look, He's answered the dua of an atheist. Why is He not answering your dua? Why is He not helping you? Why isn't He helping the people of Gaza? So shaitan comes to distort your perception of the one who loves us most, the one who is in control, and the one who has all power. So Hajar exemplified for us, radiallahu anha, the power of responding to the uncertainty of what you face in this human experience with certainty of who you know Allah is, of who you know your Lord is, and to say it, to speak it. You know those moments where you get this thought of like, oh, but is Allah going to answer my dua? Say to yourself, yes, He will. I know who you are, Allah. I know you are As-Sami' al-Basir. I know you accept. Say it, speak it, talk to Allah and say, Ya Allah, I know you're going to answer my dua. Shaitan's going to look at you and he's going to be like destroyed. I'm sitting here getting this person to not make dua and feel doubtful and feel like they can't trust Allah, and they're responding like Hajar with certainty. I know who my Lord is. When someone comes to you and says, oh, be realistic, why do you have such goals? Be realistic. You think Allah's gonna, come on, like, come down to earth, you want to achieve this and that. You know what I say? I say, I know who I'm dealing with. I know who I'm dealing with. I'm dealing with the one who has an infinite supply of what we seek. I'm dealing with the one who is the source of all resources. So when people come to you and make you feel limited, when people come to you and make you feel hopeless, when people come to you and make you doubt what Allah has in store for you because something is delayed, for example, and they're telling you to settle, tell them, I know who I'm dealing with. I know Allah will come through for me. I know Allah will not forsake me. If He put me through this test, then He will not forsake me. That is what Hajar said, radiallahu anha. So it's so important to respond to uncertainty with certainty. And there's a reason I got on this story of Hajar. Does anyone know where that point was? I know this. Let's backtrack. Yes, barakallahu fiki. So you always have to do the work. You always have to do the work. Oh, I forgot the complete point that I was trying to make. Is that after Hajar radiallahu anha says, then He will not forsake me, and Ibrahim leaves and she's with her baby, does she just sit there and wait for Allah to answer her dua? Okay, she gave this proclamation of faith and proclamation of belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. She testified to her tawakkul, right? But then she didn't just sit down. She went back and forth. And if anyone has been to, has done Umrah or Hajj, will know that right now, going between Safa and Marwa is indoors with the air conditioning on marble flooring, and it's still difficult. So can you imagine what it was like for her to go back and forth? And she wouldn't just go to the bottom of each mountain. She would go to one mountain, climb it to the top, look to see if there's any help, go back, climb the other mountain, and see if there's any help. So it wasn't just. And then she's not running on flat marble floor. She's running on, she's running in the desert. It's sand. So anyone who's walked on the beach will know how much harder it is to walk on sand than flat ground. So where does this come from? This internal locus of control, this sense of, I am responsible for the choice I make. I am responsible for doing the work. I'm responsible for putting effort. So anyone that makes you feel that religion makes you complacent or passive, they're not teaching Islam. Because everything in Islam teaches us to work, to put in the effort, to try as best as we can to rectify our situation. So that when Allah looks at us, He sees, look at my servant, they are working hard. Even patience. Patience is not that you are okay with what is happening. Patience with a situation is not that you are passive. Patience is, as long as Allah has decreed this for me, I am patient with my Lord and I'm content with my Lord. But I'm going to work to rectify my situation. I'm going to strive to improve my situation. So no passiveness, right? So a person who has a high external locus of control, they tend to be very passive. They tend to have difficulty coping with challenges, increased stress and anxiety, because, by the way, a lot of people who have anxiety will tell you, and you'll see this part of the experience of anxiety, is they feel a lot of powerlessness. I'm powerless. What can I do? I can't do anything. Can't do anything about the future. The fear overtakes that, right? So going back and turning to yourself and taking back your power from that which is external is so empowering. And it allows a person to just hone in on their capacity. Because you can get really overwhelmed by looking at all the things outside of you, because it's too much stimulus, too much factors that you have to take into account. This is why people are so scattered mentally. But the second you say, like, what can I do today? It has such a settling and grounding effect. Like when people procrastinate and they feel like they have a huge list of things to do, the second they just do one thing on the list, it empowers them and it motivates them to do the next thing on the list. So always ask yourself, what role can I play? What power do I have? What capacity did Allah give me to change something in front of me? Okay. Another disadvantage of external locus of control is lower self-esteem. Because, by the way, don't think that if you blame everything outside of you all the time, you're going to actually have any self-confidence. Self-confidence and self-esteem doesn't come from you blaming everything around you. So the more that you actually go outward and the more that you blame others and blame external factors, the less you develop a good sense of self and a healthy sense of self and good esteem. We'll get into, and there are some disadvantages. Well, I'll go over the disadvantages of internal locus of control, but first, what are some of the advantages of having an internal locus of control, where you're focusing in on what role can I play, what am I responsible for? And again, we want to differentiate between the way it's spoken about in Western psychology, and the way that we should look at it through an Islamic framework, which is that internal locus of control is not that I attribute everything that happens, good or bad, to my efforts. No, even though that's the way it's defined. But through an Islamic lens, we know that Allah looks at our efforts, but I am not in control of the outcomes. Okay? So we want to differentiate that. So when we want to develop a healthy sense of internal locus of control through an Islamic lens, we understand that Allah has given me the capacity to have control over my choices and my decisions and the role that I play and to be responsible for what He has placed in front of me, and to be responsible for making the changes that I can make to the capacity that He has given me. But I also understand that I am limited and my control comes from Him. He's the source of control and He's in control of the outcome. Okay? But what are the advantages of having this kind of internal locus of control? Is that you have greater motivation. You have a higher level of motivation. Because it's an amazing feeling to wake up every day and regardless of what's going on around you, to say, what can I do? Because you always have something to work on. You always have something to work towards. And this is an ingredient that the human being needs if they are to be happier, by the way. They need something to be working towards. If you are always fixating on what's happening around you and not what you can do, you expect misery. Because as a human being, you need to be working towards something. You need to be working towards a goal, rectifying a situation, proving yourself. This is why the path to Allah is not an arrival. You're always growing. You're always experiencing Allah on a different level. You're always working on yourself, right? Better mental health. So I said the opposite, right? That high external locus of control leads to a lot of stress, anxiety. People who have internal locus of control, they tend to experience lower stress, and they are less susceptible to anxiety and depression. And the research actually shows that a person who has an internal locus of control, it's associated with I said it already. So the research shows that, the research confirms this, that a person who has an internal sense of control, a higher internal sense of control versus a higher external sense of control, they tend to have lower stress, anxiety, and depression. Because again, you're always fixating on, what can I do? What can I work on? And it's so beautiful because, especially when you look at it through an Islamic framework, because you know that nothing is lost in front of Allah. So it's one benefit to do it without Islam, but it's a whole different benefit to do it with Islam. Knowing that Allah rewards you for the good that you do, even if you don't see the outcome that you wanted. let's say you put together an event to help people or to, bring people together for something good. And I remember back in my MSA days, we'd remind each other of this. Like, we'd put together these events and get these speakers, and sometimes only like a few people would show, and we'd remind each other, well, Allah still rewards us, for putting together this, and inshallah, may Allah accept from us. And we'd remind each other these things. It's such a beautiful, that always stayed with me, because you will do things in life and we forget that. Isn't that amazing that you can always cash in with Allah? Such a powerful, feeling to know that regardless of the outcomes that I see in this world, that I have the opportunity to still gain reward with Allah. Let's say you go meet someone that you were in conflict with, and let's say you go in with this intention of I want to resolve this, I just want to be on good terms, Ya Allah, I'm going for your sake. And let's say this person became guarded and didn't treat you well, or they didn't respond well, and they still determined to be upset with you, and they walk away and nothing is resolved. The beautiful thing about Islam is that you can cash in with Allah. That meeting you can cash in. Ya Allah, here you go, please give me my paycheck. It's when you go to, I always give this example, when you go to work, and work can be miserable, but you can cash in, you're still going to get your check, right? And that helps, right? Don't tell me that when you get your check, that doesn't help a little bit. You're like, oh, at least I get it, right? At least I get a check. I'm not saying it's, of course, I know toxic work environments can impact people, but people have this, they understand that you can get through anything if you know there's a reward. We understand this. You're willing to work out if you know there's a reward. You're in pain, you're miserable, you're sore, you're going to get a reward, right? There's going to be gains, right? So it's, I think a lot of our misery comes from being disconnected from what Allah's doing for you, even when you don't see the outcome. You call someone and, let's say, you have a relative that's, you don't really like talking to, but you call them because it's for maintaining salat al-rahim, right? And Allah knows with every fiber of your being, you gain nothing from this conversation, right? Allah knows with every, that this conversation is the most annoying thing you could do that day. But you're doing it, and it's not even about the other person. It's like this. You're engaging with the people, but you're cashing in with Allah. You hang up, you didn't get anything out of that conversation, but you got so much more from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I think that this speaks to this, that when you have this internal locus of control through that Islamic framework, rooted in that, in that God-centered lens, is that you're always asking yourself, Ya Allah, in front of you, what can I do? In front of you, what role can I play? In front of you, I want you to see that I am helping myself, because Allah helps those who help themselves. This is key. And this is so important in our times when there's a lot of entitlement. There's a lot of I deserve. Why? Where did you get this notion that you deserve all of these things? And I am seeing this, this mindset increasing in our times, where people just go out into the world feeling entitled to so much, and then feeling more connected to what they deserve, more than their connection to what they should be working on, and their striving and their efforts. So, stronger leadership. Actually, when you have a very high external locus of control, where you're always blaming things outside of you, it's very unlikely that you'll be able to lead in any capacity. As a parent, as a leader of a company, in any capacity. So people who have an internal locus of control, they tend to have stronger leadership. They tend to be more effective at leading others because they take responsibility. And you'll see this as a common trait of people who are leaders. They look at the role that they can play. They take responsibility. I always remember the story of Umar radiallahu anhum, who he was passing by a lady who was complaining about him, but she didn't know that he was Amir al-Mu'mineen. She didn't know that he was the leader of the believers, but he heard her complaining of hunger, and he didn't go and tell her, who are you to blame? I am him, and who are you to blame? We're doing the best we can, which is sometimes the response of people. He went back to where they hold like flour and wheat and all these things, and he carried a bag of whatever it was, I don't remember, but he and one of the companions said, they wanted to take this responsibility from Umar, and Umar radiallahu anhu told him no. He said, will you carry this responsibility for me on the Day of Judgment? So he carried this bag of wheat or flour back to this woman. Didn't mention that he is Amir al-Mu'mineen. But this is a characteristic of a leader, by the way, is that they look at, what can I do? A parent, in taking care of their family, they're always assessing themselves. Well, they're not just blaming things on their children. Well, what role did I play in my children acting this way? Not to say they're not going to hold their children accountable, but they're always assessing their responsibility as well. And obviously, it's not to say that everything, I don't want this to turn into everything that happens is our fault. No, this is why I mentioned the importance of looking at it through that tawazun, balanced lens that Islam teaches us, because you can't go out into the world. This is why actually there's also disadvantages of having too high internal locus of control, which I'm going to get to, which is that you tend to blame everything on yourself. And this is also an opposite extreme. So we don't want to be on either extreme, where you're always blaming that which is outside of you, or the opposite extreme where you're always blaming yourself, because a lot of people go out into the world thinking they're responsible for everything. And this is also can be a trauma response, where people feel like it's my fault that someone's treating me this way. It's my fault that this happened. It's my fault. So you have to, as you're listening to me, you have to find out where on the spectrum you are. And a big part of my work with people is about finding out where they are in any issue, finding out where they are, which extreme, and helping them find their balance. So for example, somebody who has an anger problem is on one extreme of being really aggressive. I have a different approach with them, right? No, maybe it's time to not speak up as much, right? Maybe it's time to kind of balance it out and come to the middle and know when it is to not speak and know how to speak. But let's say I'm working with someone on the opposite extreme who never speaks up for themselves. It's a different protocol. It's learning to speak up for yourself, learning to assert yourself. So getting them to the balance is really important, to the middle place. Better problem-solving skills is another advantage, better resilience. A lot of the opposite of what I mentioned, about the disadvantages of external locus of control. A lot of the advantages are the opposite of that when it comes to internal locus of control. Improved physical health is another because you have this perception that you are in control of the choices you make, what you eat, what behaviors you engage in, exercising. Like you're not just blaming that which is outside of you. So you're going to see an impact of it in so many areas. Better achievement at work, better achievement academically, because you're focused on, well, what can I do? I need tutoring. Do I need to study more? Do I need a different approach? Do I need to ask more questions in class? Like you're always assessing, what can I do to rectify my situation? We have a concept in psychology called self-efficacy, which is the belief that you're in your ability to succeed. So when you have a higher internal locus of control, you have this belief that you're able to succeed. And that's important, by the way. You have to believe that, and this is not that, so you believe that you are going to put the work, you believe in your ability to show up, you believe in your ability to make better choices for yourself. You have to believe in yourself while knowing that Allah is in full control. See that balance? But just important things to consider. Again, we want to be balanced. If you have too much of internal locus of control, even though it's a good thing, but too much of a good thing can be bad. They say that there's also disadvantages when your internal locus of control is too high. I mentioned one of them, where now you think you're responsible for all the good, but you're also responsible for anything bad. So you go out into the world thinking, oh, someone's having a bad day, it's my fault. That's not healthy either, right? But one of the disadvantages is that you can be very highly self-critical of yourself, very harsh with yourself, because you are internalizing a lot of what you witness externally. So that's an opposite extreme. That's not healthy. You might have difficulty delegating because I'm responsible for everything, so I can't tell anyone to do anything. So you have to figure out where you are at, because just because it's a good thing doesn't mean that it's good to have it at a high level, right? So you might find difficulty if you always feel like you're responsible for everything. You might find difficulty. You might struggle to share the responsibility in doing things, which this can affect a lot of people, right? Where they're doing it all and then they burn out, and especially in relationships and marriages, I see this where someone's over functioning all the time and they're afraid to share responsibility. And then it leads to, I need to control everything. So if you're always, if even having internal locus of control, if it's too high, you might become controlling. Well, it's my fault, it's my responsibility, I have to control, I have to control. So it's very difficult for you to go with the flow. It can be very difficult for you to have tawakkul. It can be very difficult for you to see Allah's power and role in your situation. So it's very tricky. You have to be connected to your capacity to change your situation while never losing a connection to Allah's power, to qadar, to Allah's control over what you're doing as well, right? And over the outcome. That's very important. Okay. So I hope that this was helpful in getting you to think about what areas in my life have I been relinquishing responsibility? Have I become passive? Have I become complacent? Have I been, spiritually bypassing, using Islam to be complacent and not actually work towards the goals that I have? Where I'm limiting myself, or I'm feeding into the limitations that people place on me? But where do I need to relinquish control? Where do I need to remind myself? So it's some people today might walk away and say, you know what, I've been too controlling. This is an area I've been too, I have this excessive need to control everything, and I need to learn how to loosen that control, to be more flexible, adaptable. So part of, teaching you this is also for you to learn to understand that not every situation requires one, or sometimes every situation requires you to function differently. One situation, you might actually need to have an external locus of control and recognize, you know what, I'm at the mercy here. There's nothing I can do here. I'm at the mercy of what happens, right? Meaning, not that it has power over you, but you have to submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there's nothing you can do. And in another situation, you have to recognize, why am I forgetting that I have the power to control my choices today? A lot of people forget this. Why am I forgetting that I actually am in control of what I say to others, how I respond? People forget this all the time. This person said this to me, and then they feel like they feel powerless. I'm like, you actually don't have to respond the same way they spoke to you, right? You actually have the power to respond to them according to your values. Or when people say, what if this person says this to me in this conflict or in this situation? Reminding them, listen, you actually have control over what you say. Remind yourself of that. This helps a lot of people when dealing with conflict, especially when they're going to approach a situation that's difficult. Reminding themselves that I actually have control over what I say, how I show up, how I respond, and that gives them a sense of agency and power. Now they're going into that conflict and they're not so scared of confrontation as they were, because they realize, I have the power to choose how to respond. Allah has given me that free will. Allah has given me that capacity to make choices about my senses, what I look at, what I listen to, how I speak, what I eat, what choices I make for myself throughout the day. How many times, my brothers and sisters, are we disconnected from all the ways we can make beautiful choices for ourselves? Right? And how many times do we fixate on what is happening to us rather than, well, what choices could I have made better for myself today? I could have chose to pray on time. I could have chose to wake up for Fajr. I could have chose to start my day after Fajr. I could have chose to go for a walk, right? It's so important to assess all the beautiful choices you can make that can add so much value to your life. And this is why I wanted to talk about this today, so that you can recognize where on the spectrum you are. Because if you're always controlling things, that's not healthy. But if you're always passive and never remembering the role that you play in your own circumstances, that's not healthy either. So it's important to find that balance and have that tawazun and come to the middle and recognize the capacity that Allah gave you to control and to have control over your choices, but also remembering that He is in full control and He is in control of all outcomes.